Did you see the farewell address from the figurehead? Did you see the pillow he was sitting on? The emergency box of Kleenex next to him? It's not his fault. I mean, bodies become frail. But did you watch the speech and see how utterly frail he is, but also how perfectly spiritually captured he is? That man was caused to read a speech wherein he pretended, or maybe not. Maybe he actually has been conned into thinking he's the defender of free speech by way of censorship. I mean, how could you do that? You're dealing with a decrepit, mentally decapacitated, or incapacitated, decapacitated, spiritually captured old man who has been wound up for 4 years and caused to say things. It's really remarkable. And I was thinking on the way in, thinking about the demons, thinking about how Satan has the demons conned. And I got a just sad image of the figurehead. We'll talk about that. We're going to also talk about the fact that our intelligence services and military thinkers have been warning about, and in fact writing about, fire as a weapon for quite a long while. Good thing there was no sign of that in the Los Angeles fires. None at all. Right? We'll talk about this through the great auspices of God Almighty. Thank you, Father, for the chance.
The Todd Herman Show is 100% disapproved by big pharma, technocrats, and tyrants everywhere. No. From the high mountains of free America, here's the Emerald City exile, Todd Herman.
Today is the day the Lord has made, and these are the times to which God has decided we shall live. Not sure what's going on with my voice this morning. Everything seemed fine until I got out of the gym this morning. Someone probably sabotaged me. So the figurehead sat down behind the desk on a pillow with his emergency box of Kleenex, and he addressed the nation from his deepest, deepest feelings. Figurehead Biden is deeply concerned about a now growing oligarchy in the United States. He, from the party of the Kennedys, except for RFK Jr., of course, he's been banned from that, is suddenly concerned about oligarchies. They didn't talk about oligarchies when we had two Bushes as president, when Hillary Rodham Clinton tried to replace the man who made her famous and gave her any and all political gravitas she ever had, William Jefferson Blythe Clinton III. No talk of oligarchies, just as there were no talk of billionaires meddling in our elections when George Soros was meddling in our elections for the past 20 years. But suddenly Elon Musk, who publicly goes about his business, publicly and transparently, stating what he wants, all of a sudden now it's very, very scary, a very bad thing that someone's doing this transparently. They prefer to have it done in the dark. And then the figureheads went on to address his deepest concern for this nation, which is the tech billionaires refusing to censor speech. Because only by censoring speech can you have free speech, and only by censoring speech can you protect the utter core of what they like to call the democracy, which is, of course, in our case, a republic. The figurehead had the perfect speech for demons. Now, here's what I mean. Satan knows he's not going to win, and yet he fools himself into thinking he's going to win. He is very familiar with the Bible. He knows it by heart better than any of us. He's had forever to study it. He knows who wins. He's read the book. Do you think the demons know? I mean, he doesn't need to share that with them. He could con them into believing they're winning. And I just think of Biden, this container. I mean, just to be gross, this bucket of skin into which these lies are poured. a lie like he's the protector of our democracy, that he's fighting against billionaires enriching themselves when he and his family, they may not be billionaires, they're not, but they have 50, 60 million, maybe $100 million from grift. They've stolen over a period of time where he has pretended to be a 50-year public servant. I once watched a speech by a very famous writer who wrote a book called Naked Lunch. I'm struggling to remember his name. We looked that up, Alex, the author of Naked Lunch. And he was a little man who had spent his life as a heroin addict, his adult life. William S. Burroughs had spent his life as an addict. And we went to go see him speak in Seattle. And he went on the stage after a guy who ended up stabbing himself to death. That's a heck of a way to die. He was also an author, and he got to warm up for William S. Burroughs. And the book Naked Lunch is a word salad, and some people consider it great literature. But as I watched him speak, this was his opening line. He sits down at this desk, and he walks, shuffles out on stage, and this is Seattle, so people stand, and they're freaking and standing ovation. And he shuffles up, and he sits down at this desk, and he pulls up his water, and he goes, Jackie Onassis Kennedy called me on the phone. She said she wanted to feel my body of work in her ear. Thunderous applause. And I was sitting there with my dearest brother, Matthew, who's he has his degree in literature. And I looked at him and said, "That's it?" He goes, "That's it." And he was there for a class assignment. And we both agreed when we left, we watched a man in hell. And if you know anything about that man's life, he purposely debauched himself in every possible capacity and then wrote about it. I look at the figureheads and I look at his family, and they're surrounding him. And I see Hunter sitting over there, who, of course, is an unregistered foreign agent, actor on behalf of countries who don't mean us well, drug addict, a guy who traffics in women, and photographic evidence seems to indicate he traffics in girls. Photographic evidence seems to indicate that he gets high on cocaine and meth while laying in bed naked next to a 14-year-old female cousin. And I look at Ashley, who wrote about the famous shower thing. I look at Ashley's husband, who has to be looking there going, that old man, creepy old man, defiled my wife, Ashley, at a young age and has set her up for a torturous life. You've got Dr. Joe Biden, who's not a doctor at all, looking there just like, okay, finally I can be done with this shuffling old man. I'm still relatively good looking. I can go find someone else. And there's the figurehead being caused to speak these lies. And I should be angry. But then I'm trying to think of this from God's perspective. Created in his image. He loves Joe Biden just as much as he loves you and me. And when was it that Joe Biden just completely departed God? And he, we're told, has been the leader. He's the guy who just promised California that we're going to be on the hook to pay for the rebuilding of a state that chose not to have any infrastructure, chose not to have water, chose to defund their fire departments to the tune of $100 million or more prior to this. And he's the guy who's going to tell us, is disinformation or misinformation, to look at the aspect of, are we going to have any curiosity about how these fires started? Have you seen any curiosity from the Mockingbird media about how these fires started? Because with just a little bit of research, I went through and found articles written by intelligence service people, military people. I found West Point briefings on this, on fire as a weapon. And there are now people in California speaking out that they saw a bunch of people starting fires, and there are talks of 300 arrests for arson. So we'll take you through some of these papers and then get to some of the sounds of the day, including the Biden staff, desperate to have the figurehead not take any questions because they know that his lack of wisdom will shine through. Lack of any form of cognitive awareness, really. I've been enjoying a new state of cognitive awareness as I use a product called Wisdom. It is a biblical-based herbal blend, and it is suspended in oil. And what I love about this is, I actually love the taste. I didn't expect to love the taste, but I do love the taste. And the benefits from this, of these 8 biblical herbs that come straight from Scripture, the benefits from this range from immunological, which you won't feel, but you'll feel when you get sick if you don't have immunological support, to helping to take inflammation. I did a workout today from which I'm probably going to be pretty inflamed, and it harnesses that on your body's behalf. It adds to mental clarity, focus, and then somehow it also adds to calmness. It is things like turmeric, anise, cinnamon, hyssop, frankincense, myrrh, tulsi, which is called holy basil, milk thistle. And it is locked in with potency because it's made in small batches, cold brewed, sound wave and light wave infused. So it utterly locks in the potency, which you taste when you take it. So you can try Wisdom. Go to trywisdomnow.com/Todd. You'll get 33% off when you stock up on Wisdom. At trywisdomnow.com/Todd, you'll get free shipping and a 180-day money-back guarantee. So head over to trywisdomnow.com/Todd. Talking with some friends who are former special forces and former intel, there's a lot of chatter right now about these fires as a terrorist attack. There's an article in the CTC Sentinel from 2013, author Joseph W. Pfeiffer. And he just wrote about fire as a weapon of terrorist attacks. It's adopted from the author's testimony and protected the homeland against Mumbai-style attacks and the threats from Lashkar al-Taliban. This was delivered to the U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security, their subcommittee. The use of fire for criminal gang and terrorist activities, as well as targeting first responders, is not new. During the past 4 decades, the New York City Fire Department has faced hundreds of intentionally set fires that would often target people. On March 25, 1999, however, the unthinkable happened. An arsonist with a plastic container of gasoline spread the fuel on the exit stairs of the Happy Land nightclub in the Bronx, intentionally killing 87 people, foreshadowing even larger events to come. While successful attacks are instructive, it's equally important to study unrealized terrorist plots, as they reveal a great deal about the adversary's intentions, motivations, target selection, and desired tactics. Arriving in the United States from the United Kingdom, al-Qaeda operative Duran Barat carried out reconnaissance for terrorist attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C. Part of his research focused on exploiting building vulnerabilities, including gaps in fire protection. He determined that he could cause significant damage to the Prudential Building in Newark, New Jersey, and the Citicorp building in New York by ramming a loaded gas tanker into the lobby and then igniting the fuel. Another al-Qaeda operative, Brooklyn-born Jose Padilla, determined that a dirty bomb attack might be too difficult to execute, so instead he planned to set wildfires, as well as, did you hear that? Wildfires, as well as ignite high-rise buildings by damaging the gas lines in apartments. An al-Qaeda cell in the United Kingdom researched means to disable fire suppression systems to increase the impact of a plot that was ultimately disrupted by authorities. Those are the ones about which we learned. This comes straight from the Department of Justice by way of a military analyst who is writing for West Point. Studies in Conflict and Terrorism, Volume 29, July and August 2006. Pyroterrorism, the threat of arson-induced forest fires as future terrorist weapon of mass destruction. Just as we would have to believe that al-Qaeda and the Taliban and the other Islamists are utterly stupid idiots who don't understand thing one about fighting or tactical planning or strategic planning, to believe that they haven't flooded our country with operatives who are right now going out into black market activities to take our money and send it to them, black market activities like, dealing in heroin and fentanyl and meth and cocaine. And we know, of course, that figurehead Biden and Barack Hussein Obama allowed them to continue to do that, both in the Project Cassandra thing where Obama and Biden stopped the indictment and arrests of Taliban fighters and executive leaders who were trafficking drugs in partnership with narco-terrorists from Mexico. They also stopped the same form of investigation against Hamas, who was trafficking cocaine into our country. They sell black market cigarettes, and they traffic in girls and boys. They take that money and they send that money home to fund terrorist activities. We'd have to be stupid to believe that they're not pouring into our country over the non-existent southern border. And now we've learned as well the northern border. We'd also have to be utterly insipid and mentally deranged to believe that they haven't looked at the vulnerability of cities like Los Angeles and Pasadena. They cannot be unaware that in the land of performative politics, where people take office for the sole reason of having visibility, fame, and grift, that they couldn't go out and exploit that. Just as there was absolutely no curiosity from the press about why the intelligence services lied about the laptop. Not a single ounce of curiosity. I haven't seen a single ounce of curiosity into why these fires started so quickly and spread so quickly. Oh, I know there were hurricane force winds. Fair enough. How did they hop from city to city to city? Why did we see people arrested with blowtorches? Why were we able to produce 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 videos of people starting fires? Why do we have these reports every time this happens? We have reports of citizens saying, no, we watched them set fires along the freeway. We called it in. One of the replies that you will get is, well, no terrorist group has taken credit for this. How do you know? Do they send you a direct note saying, hey, by the way, we did that? And one of the things that people will do, organizations will do, is they'll change tactics. Why take credit? If you're achieving the goal of massive economic loss of life, loss of belief in the institutions, draining the resources of law enforcement and the fire department, and causing harm to the psyche of Americans, why would you take credit? Do it privately. Raise funds based on it privately. There is absolutely no doubt, there can't be, that our adversaries are quite aware of the fact that figurehead Biden is so weak mentally that his staff to this day, even as he's on his way out the door, praise God, his staff to this day refuses to let the deranged old man answer questions. And I'll show you this in a second. Even on his last few days in office, they refuse to do that. One of our friends of the show has his company located in California. I'm not sure why he did that. Well, it's where they live, and there's family support, and he's actually told me this. But they exist down there, and they're one of those people, one of those families who keeps their souls intact. That's really, really hard to do. And I think they do that because I think God picked them for a very, very special mission. That is to show that you can build a company based on a product that is not sexy. It's not going to get anybody super excited. It's not going to be something that ends up making you famous, but it's something people need, and that's Allen Soaps. You're going to need soap for the rest of your life. So purchase soap from Allen Soaps and back the mission. The mission is just exactly what we'd all think that we should support, all lives mattering. The mission of Allen's is to employ people who Democrats would say should have been aborted or should be stored in a box. We used to have one employee, now we have 3. That's because of you and the support. The soap is what matters to you, right? Obviously, you want to support the mission, but you could do that through a charity. Here's why you do it through Allen's. The soap is made in America. It's all natural. It's made by a family with 3 generations of soap making expertise. So put this in your mind. Allen Soaps, Allen Soaps, Allen Soaps. And then next time you're washing your body, ask yourself why it's not Allen's. Or avoid the question and get it Allen's now. Go to allensoaps.com/Todd. That's allensoaps.com/Todd. You get 10% off all the products there. allensoaps.com/Todd. Even as he is on his way out, praise God, the staff of the White House refuses to let the figurehead answer questions, refuses to let reporters be heard asking them. That cackling gaggle, and forgive me, of young chicks, forgive me, they rehearse this. And if you're not watching the video, you didn't have the advantage of seeing the figurehead shrug at the camera like, well, nothing I can do. They wouldn't even let me hear the questions. Everyone involved in the charade that Biden has had any cognitive value beyond knowing instinctively how to grift or to yell at people is guilty of a massive crime. I mean, it may not be a felony or a misdemeanor, but it is a massive, massive lie. And the risk they put this country through it's incalculable. The harm that's been done through that man is relatively incalculable. Is it going to be turned around? Pete Hegseth is a wildly imperfect man who doesn't seem to respect marriage, not even a little bit. Sorry. I mean, we all make mistakes. And perhaps Pete Hegseth has finally let the Lord change his need for apparently sex or intimacy or all 3. And look, loneliness is a hard thing. And there are people watching this who are in that lonely state. It's a hard thing. And marriage sometimes is incredibly difficult. There are seasons of great difficulty. And if you look at this from a perspective of personal relationships, think about this. A person who wouldn't consider your marriage sacred and inviolable, why would they consider your kids, your relationship with your kids, sacred and inviolable? Sometimes I've heard women say, well, this guy's boyfriend material, but not husband material. I'll date him. I've heard men say the same thing. Oh, yeah, she's a good girlfriend, not marriage material. So all that's to say that Pete Hegseth has a glaring problem. And in Washington, D.C., sorry, he's average. That is the average behavior in Washington, D.C. All too often, those behaviors go hand in hand with being in that position. Sometimes it's because you give in to being in that position, because in Washington, D.C., the greatest aphrodisiac is power. Access to power, male and female. I know this because I've watched it happen. I've seen it occur. So let's be wide-eyed about Pete Hegseth on that front and prayerful, because that's his particular sin issue. You have, on the other hand, General Whiterage's sin issue that he offered to commit treason with the Chinese Communist Party. You have the deeply conflicted Lloyd Austin, who had to have a special waiver because he was stepping down from a defense contractor to step in to run the Department of Defense. He now, we've learned, disappeared another 2 times for medical reasons without telling anybody. not even figurehead Biden and the people who run Biden. Lloyd Austin has his own sin problem. They are spiritually captured on the front of DEI and pretending men are women and forcing female soldiers to shower next to male counterparts and forcing females into elite combat roles where they cannot perform for the most part, 90% of the time. They can't. They drag units down, and it's nothing against the women. Men and women are different mechanically, physically, mentally. There's just a new report out about this, that there are women in elite combat roles. They always drag the unit down. Again, it's not against the women. I'm sure that they're doing the best they possibly can do. No one would go through that if they weren't willing to do the best they could possibly do, but the best they could possibly do cannot match up. So I will take Pete Hegseth's problem with sex and marriage over the problems with Lloyd Austin and the problems with General White Rage and the problems with generals who never win wars but always get raises. Because he's a different sort of broken. Except in Washington, D.C., as I said, he's average broken. And, of course, there's a whole forest of logs sticking straight out of my eye right now. Probably out of yours as well. Let's remember that. I'll take Pete Hegseth any day for a number of reasons. This is part of his opening statement during his hearings. Pete Hegseth.
The Department of Defense under Donald Trump will achieve peace through strength. And in pursuing these America First national security goals will remain patriotically apolitical and stridently constitutional. Unlike the current administration, politics should play no part in military matters. We are not Republicans. We are not Democrats. We are American warriors. Our standards will be high and they will be equal, not equitable. That's a very different word. We need to make sure every warrior is fully qualified on their assigned weapon system, every pilot's fully qualified and current on the aircraft they are flying, and every general or flag officer is selected for leadership or promotion purely based on performance, readiness, and merit. Leaders at all levels will be held accountable, and warfighting and lethality and the readiness of the troops and their families will be our only focus. This has been my focus ever since I first put on the uniform as a young Army ROTC cadet at Princeton University in 2001. I joined the military because I love my country and felt an obligation to defend it. I served with incredible Americans in Guantanamo Bay, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and on the streets of Washington, D.C., many of which are with me here today. This includes enlisted soldiers I helped become American citizens, and Muslim allies I helped immigrate from Iraq and Afghanistan. Because when I took off the uniform, my mission never stopped. Now, it is true and has been acknowledged that I don't have a similar biography to defense secretaries of the last 30 years. But as President Trump also told me, we've repeatedly placed people atop the Pentagon with supposedly the right credentials, whether they are retired generals, academics, or defense contractor executives. And where has it gotten us? He believes, and I humbly agree, that it's time to give someone with dust on his boots the helm. A change agent, someone with no vested interest in certain companies or specific programs or approved narratives. My only special interest is the warfighter. Deterring wars, and if called upon, winning wars by ensuring our warriors never enter a fair fight. We let them win, and we bring them home. Like many of my generation, I've been there. I've led troops in combat. I've been on patrol for days. I've pulled the trigger downrange, heard bullets whiz by, flex-cuffed insurgents, called in close air support, led medevacs, dodged IEDs, pulled out dead bodies, and knelt before a battlefield cross. This is not academic for me. This is my life. I led then, and I will lead now. Ask anyone who's ever worked for me. or with me. I know what I don't know. My success as a leader, and I very much look forward to discussing my organization's successes at Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done. But my success as a leader has always been setting a clear vision, hiring people smarter and more capable than me, empowering them to succeed, holding everyone accountable, and driving toward clear metrics. Build the plan, work the plan, and then work harder than everyone else around you. I've sworn an oath to the Constitution before, and if confirmed, I will proudly do it again. This time, for the most important deployment of my life. I pledge to be a faithful partner to this committee, taking input and respecting oversight. We share the same goals: a ready, lethal military, the health and well-being of our troops, and a strong and secure America. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to your questions.
Clearly, it's a written speech, and I don't know if he wrote it. I know that he could, given his intelligence and his academic background, which, again, is profoundly impressive. What's more impressive to me is the fact that he is a prototypical man, successful, wildly successful at one thing, not so successful in marriage. It is axiomatic sometimes to powerful men. Sadly, that's just the case. It's a very difficult thing sometimes to steward the gifts God gave you, his good looks, his fame, etc. Sometimes people fall. We all have friends who do that. But on the topic of leadership and experience, he is the right guy to right-size a Pentagon, which has proven time and again it does not care as much about the troops in the field as it does the big equipment sales. Hence, Lloyd Austin getting a waiver for stepping off the board of Raytheon to come over for a few years and help Raytheon make more money. Of course, he's going to get a bonus on the back end because our financial system shows corruption across the board. January 20th, coming up this Monday, President Trump will give his inauguration speech. God willing, he will then take office. God willing, he's not between now and then. God willing. When that happens and President Trump steps into the Oval Office, rumor is he's got about 300 executive orders lined up to go, some of them having to do with the economy, reversing things like figurehead Biden being caused to effectively ban natural gas, turning over things like bans on pipelines, etc. And I'm going to be looking for something that we can say there's nothing that the left, the machine politics, Mitch McConnell and his dear, dear friend Nancy Pelosi can do to stop these things. Not a huge fan of governing via executive order, so I'm also going to be hoping that these are constitutional and clearly within executive powers, because they like to remain consistent. But what I do know is that the empire is going to fight back. So that's January 20th. Coming up January 30th, Zach Abraham, my friend and brother from Bulwark Capital Management, he's the chief investment officer there. He's doing his first free live webinar 10 days after President Trump's inauguration speech, because Zach is going to be responding to what we see in the first week or so of the Trump administration. How is this going to affect your retirement? Just because it does great things for the energy sector doesn't mean you're lined up. Zach's been putting his clients like me in energy for years. He's been putting us into small utilities for years, small regional utilities, because of the need for electricity. It's not just driven by electric cars and the Democrats forcing that down on people. It's driven by data centers and AI. We're positioned, if President Trump comes along and expands American energy. Zach has us in things like micronuclear. Zach has us in a lot of things because he spreads the bets. He's all about risk management. And it's Zach's theory that only by actively managing portfolios can you have risk management. And in fact, active management portfolios can reduce risk and volatility. So go to this free live webinar and see how this is going to affect your retirement, these changes in our economy. It's super easy. It's a free live webinar, but you just have to register to attend. Go to knowyourriskradio.com. That's K-N-O-W, knowyourriskradio.com, and register for the free live webinar coming up Thursday, January 30th. Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 25-103. So Pete Hegseth is very, very different behaviorally from a background, not so much morally, at least on the topic of marriage. I know that he loves Jesus. You can love Jesus and still have gaping holes in your walk. I'll pray that his walk is now secure, that he is now, in fact, going to stay in this marriage. Unless, of course, well, I don't want to get into the whole biblical thing. Pete Hegseth got the support of Timothy Sheehy, senator, who spoke his support in a pretty unique way, aware of what the culture has become.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are 2 genders.
I know that well. I'm a she-he, so I'm on board. What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4 A1 rifle?
That's a 5.56.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
What do you think are
47, right? Everyone get that? Everyone get that? President Trump will be the, got it.
What do you think are most important strategic bases in the Pacific?
In the Pacific, Guam is pretty strategically significant.
How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard issue is 30, Senator.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm, Senator.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell.
So right there, you're representing qualifications that show you understand what the warfighter deals with every single day on the battlefield. You understand what happens on the front line, where our troops will be. And what happens, unfortunately, in this country is decisions made in rooms like this, bad decisions, end up in dead 17, 18, 19-year-old Americans. And those Americans rarely come from families that sit in rooms like this. They come from lower, middle-income families who sometimes the military is their only way out. And they join because maybe they want to go to college. Maybe they had no other choice. Maybe they love this country. But for whatever reason, they joined and they sat on the dotted line. And when people like us screw up, they don't come home. And that's the one thing that I care about. As you remember when I shut the door, when you came with your entourage, Senator Coleman, I've known for a long time, and you and I sat together, asked you one question. You remember what that question was?
Are you going to have the backs of the warfighters?
Exactly. What is going to be your number one priority? And I don't care, frankly, what all these letters and articles say. I've been a part of a smear campaign too, I get it. I care that you're going to have one thing in mind when you sit in that chair in that 5-sided building, and you told me what that was. So with that, you have my support. I'm sorry you have to go through a process like this.
Imagine being 19 or 20 and you are in Fallujah and you've been brought in for your first patrol. So you've trained for it, you've drilled for it. You're the best of the best. And you come out and here's your Humvee. And you know Fallujah is a hot spot. You know there's IEDs everywhere. You know you're a target. You're going to go into these complex circumstances where are those 3 boys running up to you with American flags, do they also have S-vests? Vests? Are they coming to distract you so snipers in the rooftop can ping you with headshots? Or are they boys with American flags who are excited to see you? So you go out with your commands, and you walk up to a Humvee, and you're next to some of the guys who've been on, this is their 3rd tour. And you hear one of them say, S word. What? It's not up armored. All right, guys, here's the deal. This is not an up armored Humvee. Everybody take the helmets off, sit on the helmets. We might ask you later to take your plate carriers off, sit on your plate carriers. IEDs come up from behind or come up from below. Your nation sent you to Fallujah to build a nation, but they didn't up armor your Humvee. I guarantee Lloyd Austin's limousines are up armored. So are General White rages. So imagine if you are a warfighter and you hear Pete Hegseth's fanatical focus on being there for you. I think I might be excited. I think it might reinvigorate me. If I was doubting if I was going to re-up, I think I might re-up. If I loved what I did and could still do it well. Tim Sheehy's from Montana. Montana's made an interesting move. The governor there has created a bill or a movement, and he has the support of Republicans in the House and the Senate, and it has to do with war fighting. Yeah, Montana has to do with war fighting. You know, I can't go through a topic like this, Pete Hegseth, the war, the lack of up-armored Humvees, without thinking of my friend Tim Cruikshank, who was a Navy SEAL, who did 3 deployments on our behalf. He was in combat on those 3 occasions. He's had that really well-equipped experience. He's had the experience where he wasn't particularly well-equipped. He once told me that the one time that the area he was fighting got into his head, it wasn't Fallujah, it was Babylon. He was telling me, he was in combat going, I cannot believe I am fighting in Babylon. This is so biblical. And Tim is a man who's given his life to Jesus. That's one of the reasons the bags of coffee say God, country, team on every Bone Frog coffee. Because that's how Tim organizes his life. God, country, team. Team to him also means family. It means friends. And in the case of Bone Frog, it means the veterans he hires. Because every time he can, he hires vets. Every time he can, he works with veteran-owned companies. But he wasn't able to find a Navy SEAL who knew how to make great coffee. So instead, he found a soft-foot civilian, a guy who's a genius at coffee, proven by the fact that he forced Starbucks to purchase his company because they couldn't get out of his way. The coffee was better. Still is. That was Seattle's best coffee. That coffee brewer was Dave Stewart. Dave makes many of the roasts for Bone Frog, and he mentors Tim and the rest of the team on making coffee. If you haven't yet tried it, go try the simple, easy sample pack. 6 4-ounce samples of Bone Frog. You can get this in K-Cup. You can get it in espresso. You can get it in drip, French drip, etc. Just go to bonefrogcoffee.com/Todd once you try it, or if you've already tried it, make sure you subscribe because you'll save 10% for the rest of your life on bonefrogcoffee.com. bonefrogcoffee.com/Todd. bonefrogcoffee.com/Todd. This is Freedom Caucus member Representative Caleb Hinkle from the state of Montana. The governor there has a view of warfighting, and he's going to use what he can, which is his control over the National Guard in the state of Montana, to begin to insist upon a change in how we fight wars, or more importantly, not how, but why.
I think anybody here should underestimate this topic. This is really a topic that separates the men from the boys here in the legislature. Essentially, Defend the Guard is simply constitutionally that we shall not deploy our Guard troops in any war zone and or combat zone without congressional approval, a congressional declaration of war. We have not had one of these since World War II. And why I say this separates the men from the boys in this chamber is it really separates the Republicans from the Democrats, from the governor's office to the constitutionalists. And the reason that the Montana Freedom Caucus took up legislation like this is because they are some of the greatest patriots I have ever met in my life, are right behind me right now. And so it's a big piece of legislation. It is carried by Representative Lee Deming. I suggest you all look into it further. Thank you.
So here's what it will do, this legislation. It will refuse National Guard members from Montana being sent into foreign wars unless Congress declares war. Very simple. This has been dodged for decades. We just stopped declaring war. Do you know that we're still fighting the Iraq War? The fact that we still have troops in Syria, that's an extension of a continuing resolution to continue to fight Desert Storm. They just continue to do this. So there's a changing of the mental guard in the Republican Party. Praise God. Pete Hegseth is part of this. Hegseth is going to be responsible for the Department of Defense and fighting these wars. But we also, of course, have this war at home. And Tom Homan, who's going to be the border czar, hate that phrase, czar, he has said that they're going to begin to have showcase meetings every week to show the sort of people that they're deporting. There's rumors that they intend to start in Washington, D.C. by grabbing up cartel leaders who are trafficking in sex with children and other people and labor and drugs, are in and around Washington, D.C., so they can show, even in the nation's capital, this stuff is happening blocks from the White House. Brilliant, brilliant idea. But we better understand something as well. And when they start shutting down the border, this is where I think the terrorist cells in our country, this is where I think they start to go kinetic. Why would they do large-scale terrorist attacks right now where they can still import hundreds of operatives a month, maybe more? In fact, you probably haven't heard about this because it hasn't gotten very much attention. This is from valleycentral.com. Border Patrol arrested a former Russian mercenary on Saturday when he illegally crossed the Rio Grande near Roma. Timur Preliev waded across the Rio Grande carrying 2 passports and $4,000. The defendant was also in possession of a drone in his backpack when he crossed the United States, Assistant U.S. Attorney Amanda McCoglin said on Tuesday morning, when Preliev appeared before a judge at the federal courthouse in McAllen, and he admitted when interviewed to being a member of the Wagner Group. Remember when they were the scary militia who was going to go take Putin out, and then they didn't, and then their leader was killed in a plane crash? The Wagner Group has also been something that Putin and other leaders in Russia use to carry out projects so they can come along and go, wow, that's a rogue group, man, we're sorry. It's sort of their version of Hamas. Well, we can't control the Wagner Group. I mean, they tried to take Putin out. So you could call them mercenaries, but it's just another form of an NGO, a non-government organization that's a government organization. The left is using NGOs to flood our country with illegal immigrants to destroy our electoral college, but we're to believe that they don't bring in people who are willing to go start forest fires in California or urban fires, and that the Russians would never bring someone across the border with a drone and $4,000 in cash who's here to, just look around our military bases and such with drones. Of all people, John Fetterman, what happened to him? I mean, he's almost red-pilled. Maybe it's the recovery from the traumatic brain injury. Fetterman talked about the fact that Democrats refused to pass the Lake and Riley Act, which would simply deport illegal immigrants who commit murder. Well, or kill them. The death penalty. Listen to Fetterman.
Like it's really common sense. And I'd like to remind everybody that we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of migrants here illegally that have convicted of crimes. And why, I don't know why, who wants to defend that, to allow them to remain in our nation? That. And now if you're here illegally and you're committing crimes and those things, I don't know why anybody thinks that it's controversial that they all need to go.
Do you think that this was one of, if not the biggest issue for this election?
Well, I think if we can't, there's 47 of us in the Senate, and if we can't pull up with 7 votes, if we can't get at least 7 out of 47, and if we can't, then that's the reason why we lost. That's one of them. That's one of why we lost, in part.
Go ahead.
Brett, if you think about that, I mean, that's what he's saying.
Could it be that this guy is actually growing up? He never had a real job, trust fund kid and all. Maybe he's really growing up. Maybe the weight of the responsibility of being a senator hit him. That can happen to people unless you're depraved and demented and a grifter. We began the program today talking about Joe Biden's bye-bye speech he was caused to give, sitting on his pillow with his emergency box of tissue next to him, where he was caused to read lines saying that he's the great defender of what they call our democracy because he's destroying free speech, which is how you defend democracies, of course, which is government censorship. Joe Biden, on his last speech to the American people as figurehead, also said this about our border.
Look, let's get something in mind about the border. When I became president, the numbers came way down, number one. Number two, we had a circumstance where I pushed very hard for a bipartisan agreement to put more people on the border, more Secret Service agents. And guess what? He's on the phone saying, don't do it, make me look bad.
So number one, the figurehead said that they wanted Secret Service agents on the border. Number two, the numbers at the border came down. Because why would they wait at the border when they can use the Custom Border Patrol app, the CBP app, to simply sign up to fly into the country illegally? Why traipse across the desert with a coyote? Just take a flight. It started as a lie, in my judgment, the lie being that he was elected, in my judgment. It ends with a lie, that he's a patriot. He's a spiritually captured, grifting old man, and there, but by the grace of God, go we all. This is the Todd Herman Show. Please go be well, be strong, be kind, and please make every effort to praise God and to walk in the light of Christ.